Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, June 13. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Two San Diego County supervisors are taking aim at gun manufacturers, saying they want the power to sue for gun violence. This comes after the U.S. Senate appears to have reached a bipartisan agreement on gun control. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen has the details.
I don't want guns in my school. I don't want guns in our homes. More guns does not mean that I will be safer.
That's 10th grader Talia Fish of the Grower School in Encinitas, pleading with officials and voters to stop gun violence.
I'm not old enough to vote, but I am old enough to know that I don't feel safe going to school. I don't feel safe entering malls. I don't feel safe shopping in the grocery store. I don't feel safe because the leaders running this nation have not been listening.
Motivated by young voices like Fish's, County Supervisors Nathan Fletcher and Tara Lawson-Raymer tomorrow say they plan to introduce a policy that will allow the county to sue gun manufacturers for their role in gun violence. Fletcher says litigation has worked before.
Particularly in issues of tobacco and opioids, where individuals act recklessly and irresponsibly, and there is a considerable moral damage or harm that is done while they profit off of their product, and we think it's time that we explore is that same mechanism available for us here.
This is similar to steps that cities elsewhere have taken to curb gun violence, he says. Los Angeles, for example, is suing ghost gun maker Polymer 80 for selling its kits without background checks or serial numbers. But gun advocates say the idea is ludicrous. Michael Schwartz is with the San Diego County Gun Owners Political Action Group.
Hey, this is like suing a car manufacturer for drunk driving. It doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't pass the sniff test. You know, when people are explained what this is intended to do, they're truly against it.
But recent mass shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde have intensified calls for gun control.
A group of senators yesterday announced a bipartisan agreement on gun control issues, but locally, Fletcher and Lawson-Raymer say they still need to do everything they can.
And the idea that you have gun manufacturers who are focused day in and day out on selling guns that are designed to kill and selling those to young people in order to maximize shareholder profit, that is unconscionable.
If passed, the policy will direct counties' lawyers to bring back recommendations to the Board of Supervisors whenever litigation is appropriate. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
It was day 2 in the public hearing investigating the deadly January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Today, more witnesses testified that former President Donald Trump knowingly spread false claims of fraud during the 2020 election. More now from reporter Chris Nguyen.
Day 2 of the January 6 hearings kicked off with some unexpected drama after former Trump campaign manager Bill Stepien pulled out after his wife went into labor. The Select Committee opting to present parts of his previous deposition to help illustrate testimony.
I didn't think what was happening was necessarily honest or professional at that point in time.
His testimony, as well as that of former Attorney General Bill Barr, adds to the committee's argument that then-President Donald Trump was already laying the groundwork for his unfounded claim that the election was stolen before anyone had a chance to examine whether any evidence of widespread voter fraud existed.
Well, the early claims that I understood were completely bogus and silly and usually based on complete misinformation.
The committee also says Trump cast aside his legal team when they told him he lost, bringing in conspiracy-pushing advisors like former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who believed the baseless claims of election contractor Dominion voting system switching votes.
What they were proposing, I thought, was nuts. And the theory was also completely nuts.
Witnesses present at the hearing included local election officials from Georgia and Pennsylvania who investigated claims of fraud.
Not only was there not evidence of 8,000 dead voters voting in Pennsylvania, there wasn't evidence of 8.
The committee using their testimony and those from Trump's inner circle to outline why he was responsible for the events of January 6th.
Donald Trump lost an election and knew he lost an election, and as a result of his loss, decided to wage an attack on our democracy.
Chris Wynn, KPBS News.
A one-day safety pause of aircraft has been ordered by the U.S. Navy following multiple crashes. The pause is for today and includes all non-deployed units to ensure the safety of troops as they train. The decision comes after 5 Camp Pendleton Marines were killed last Wednesday when their Osprey crashed during training in Imperial County in what's being called an aviation mishap. Earlier this month, a Navy fighter pilot died after crashing his aircraft in a desert in San Bernardino County. The safety pause does not include U.S. Marines. Right now, the San Diego City Council is debating a new budget for the fiscal year that begins on July 1st. Mayor Todd Gloria's proposed $1.89 billion general fund budget boosts funding for parks and recreation, environmental services, and stormwater management. Meanwhile, proposed funding for the police and fire departments stayed relatively steady. Members of the public are also weighing in today. Alejandro Amador is a San Ysidro resident who advocated for improved parks in his community.
Parks improve our well-being, reduce pollution, and bring people together. But not all of us have had that equal access to quality parks. Bard Park is an opportunity to address the heavy burden of air pollution in San Ysidro and the lack of resources in our community to combat it.
The City Council is holding its final hearings next week. The budget must be finalized by June 30th. The city of San Diego is contemplating giving money to hundreds of seniors and others to help them pay their rent. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman says council members are looking to include a rental assistance program in the upcoming budget.
The Housing Stability Fund pilot project would give eligible San Diegans $500 a month to help pay their rent. The plan includes enough money to cover 300 households over the next 2 years. San Diego City Council President Sean Elo Rivera says while the proposal did not make the mayor's revised budget, he's hoping higher than expected revenues will change that.
We cannot solve our homelessness crisis without preventing people from falling into homelessness.
The rental assistance program would support seniors, those with disabilities, families, and transitional youth, regardless of their immigration status.
And it follows the recommendations that Serving Seniors made last fall.
Serving Seniors CEO Paul Downey says a recent needs assessment shows most homeless seniors are on the streets because they can't afford housing. He says an extra $500 a month could make all the difference, especially for seniors on fixed income.
They are struggling with inflation now. Over 8% came out last week. So they're being hit hard. And when you're on a fixed income and your rent keeps going up, groceries keep going up, and expenses for everything else, that puts them closer to homelessness.
San Diego County supervisors are also looking at a similar rental subsidy proposal. Downey says keeping people from losing their homes also saves taxpayer money.
Investing a few $1,000s a year in somebody to prevent the homelessness is a lot cheaper than what we're spending now. The rental subsidy that we're talking about now helps in the short term, but it's really not a long-term solution.
Downey says the long-term solution is building more affordable housing, but he says programs like this help in the meantime. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Any day now, the U.S. Supreme Court will be giving their opinion on a variety of cases that will have implications nationwide, among them abortion and gun rights. As Gloria Pazmino reports, the highly contentious rulings are triggering security concerns across the country.
The Supreme Court is expected to issue major decisions this month as its session draws to a close. While the nation waits, security is on high alert. On the docket, a major abortion rights ruling. A draft majority opinion overturning Roe v. Wade leaked in May suggests the court is poised to end decades of guaranteed federal constitutional protections for abortion rights. The ruling could leave abortion policy up to states, making it available in some, while others could ban or limit the procedure.
It's clear that if, in fact, the decision comes down the way it does and these states impose the limitations they're talking about, it's going to cause a mini revolution.
Questions involving the Second Amendment are also on the docket.
Carrying a firearm outside the home is a fundamental constitutional right.
That was the opening statement from the attorney for the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association and two other plaintiffs. They say New York's long-established process to obtain concealed carry permits for handguns is unconstitutional.
If this right to carry goes through the Supreme Court and becomes the law of the land, can you imagine being on a 4 train with someone having a 9mm exposed? Everyone on the train is carrying.
In the meantime, Capitol Police have ramped up security as more protests are expected. Gloria Pasmino, KPBS News.
Children under the age of 5 years old may soon be able to get Pfizer's vaccine. The FDA says its treatment of 3 doses is safe for children in that age group, and it creates a beneficial immune response. The decision is based on a trial that included 4,500 kids under the age of 5. FDA advisors will meet on Wednesday to decide if the Pfizer shots should be given emergency use authorization. As the CDC and the FDA continue to investigate a multi-state hepatitis outbreak linked to strawberries, a local family who got sick after eating the berry is suing the farm and distributor. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado spoke with their attorney about the case.
When the Arthur family of San Diego ate fresh organic strawberries, they never imagined they would get sick. But that's exactly what happened. David, Michelle, and their 16-year-old daughter were all infected with hepatitis A.
Fortunately, the mother and the daughter, a minor, got, less sick. The father was so sick he was hospitalized with extremely high liver numbers, which caused the doctors to be monitoring him as to whether or not he might need a liver transplant.
He's out of the hospital now, but is still suffering the effects of the illness.
There's the risk of a relapse, which can happen. So, even people who are hospitalized and are home now are not completely out of the woods.
The CDC and FDA have linked dozens of illnesses to a grower in Mexico that sells the strawberries under the names Fresh Campo and H-E-B Organics. Marler has filed a lawsuit on behalf of the San Diego family and others against the Mexican grower and the California-based distributor Meridian Fine Foods, which owns the brand.
20 of them have been hospitalized. And hospitalization means that they're sick enough that they're being monitored for liver failure. Liver failure can cause death or, in the best scenario, may well cause you to have a liver transplant.
Marler says it only takes a small amount of the virus on the food to make people sick.
The problem is that it is contaminated with a human fecal virus, which isn't that pleasant to think about. That can cause, extreme illness.
While many are hesitant to eat strawberries after this outbreak, Marler says this virus is only limited to these brands. Robin Ukigawa, the manager of the Carlsbad Strawberry Company, says her family has been growing strawberries for decades and takes pride in how they're grown.
We adhere to very strict policies in how they're grown and especially use clean, fresh water.
She says having families come and pick berries themselves serves 2 purposes. One is for fun, the other, education.
It's really important that people should educate and know where their produce and fruit and vegetables are and how they're grown.
We reached out to Fresh Campo and Meridian Fine Foods. They declined an interview but sent us a statement that reads in part, "Our hearts go out to everyone who was affected by the May 2022 hepatitis A contamination associated with fresh organic strawberries. We, unfortunately, cannot address the specific issues in the case because it's under litigation." Marler says there is something you can do to avoid getting sick.
The good thing is that it's the only foodborne illness that is vaccine preventable.
He also says lawsuits aimed at holding companies accountable are the most effective way to prevent future outbreaks. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
San Diego County firefighters are battling two separate fires, including one that's still growing. The so-called Border 13 fire sparked just before 1 o'clock this afternoon east of Marin Valley near Border Road. So far, it's burned 577 acres and is 0% contained. And shortly after the fire erupted, firefighters and sheriff's deputies rescued 5 people near the burn zone, and paramedics took 2 of them to a hospital. CAL FIRE says the fire is not threatening any nearby communities, and crews are making good progress. And local crews worked through the night to get the upper hand on the Barrett fire. It was reported around 6:45 last night, 2 miles south of Barrett Junction. 16 buildings were evacuated for a time, and at last check, it was 25% contained and holding at 65 acres. Ground and air resources continued working today to build the containment line and to mop up some hot spots.
Our wind advisories are posted here across Southern California as we have a cold front that is pressing southward. And as it does so out ahead of the front, the winds really will be increasing here. But we do warm up pretty quickly moving forward towards the middle to later part of the work week. Temperatures will rebound pretty nicely here. I'll show you those in just a moment. We do have, though, some wind advisories that remain in effect, mainly through some of the higher terrain here through late on Monday night. After that, they will be allowed to discontinue. Tonight, temperatures get down into the low 60s with a couple of low clouds hanging around. And as we look ahead to the rest of the region, we get down into the mid-60s, or rather mid-50s for you in Escondido, getting down to 52 out towards Ramona, 61 for you into Chula Vista, 69 in Borrego Springs. Here's that big story again, front dropping south. Big dip in the jet stream that's allowing for the breezy, cooler air to work its way in further south. And as we look ahead to your temperatures on Tuesday afternoon, we'll be in the low 80s into Escondido, 87 for you in Ramona, still in the triple digits in Borrego Springs, and 73 out towards Mount Laguna. Wednesday, we begin that warm up all over again. So a brief drop in temperatures Tuesday. We begin the warming trend as we head towards Wednesday. Near the coast, temperatures low to mid 70s here over the next couple of days. Perhaps a little bit of a drop, the next storm system approaching next weekend, but not a whole lot of change day in, day out, and we are staying dry. Further inland, temps going from the low to mid 80s, maybe into the upper 80s by Thursday, and then cooling off a little bit Friday and Saturday. 80s, low 80s at that on Friday, and then 70s as we head towards next Saturday. In the mountains, temperatures here low to mid 80s, or rather low to mid 70s for your Tuesday and Wednesday, close to 80 on Thursday, and then we'll begin that downward trend as we head towards Friday and Saturday. And in the deserts, temperatures triple-digit heat on the way, all the way through Friday, and then into the weekend, we cool back down into the mid-90s. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Jessica Pash.
An interim report by California's first-of-its-kind Reparations Task Force links the start of owning and enslaving Black Americans in the United States to today's systemic racism. KPBS's Jade Hindman explains the report is a major step toward outlining how the state can fix persistent racial inequalities and compensate Black people for past harm.
The prevailing narrative is that California entered the Union as a free state and that Jim Crow and racism never existed here. But a year-long examination that included expert testimony and history records by the California Reparations Task Force exposed that narrative as a myth.
Those dominant narratives have been pretty much altogether dispelled, right? We learned very early on in the process that California did have slavery in the state. We've learned early on in the process that Jim Crow did exist in California.
Moore says that reality didn't just impact African Americans in the past. Its devastating consequences continue into the present day through laws, policies, and institutions. The task force calls them badges of slavery, and Moore says they pervade every sector of civil society.
We outlined, racial terror, separate and unequal education, political disenfranchisement, housing segregation, racism in environment and infrastructure, the pathologizing of the Black family, control over creative, cultural, and intellectual life, stolen labor and hindered opportunity, an unjust legal system, mental and physical harm and neglect, and then lastly, the wealth gap.
The report outlines numerous recommendations to help repair slavery's damage and the lingering effects on Black Americans. Proposals include free health care and interest-free home loans. The task force is also proposing that California create an agency to support genealogical research to help people confirm their eligibility for reparations. To qualify, a person must be a descendant of an enslaved Black person or of a free Black person living in the U.S. before the end of the 19th century. Dr. Evelyn McDowell, whose testimony led to some of the proposals around eligibility, says genealogical research is also key to true self-knowledge.
It is extremely important for yourself, for your own self-love, to know who you are and where you came from so you can identify how you fit in the history of this country. So I just think it's a good thing for us individually to do. It's a good thing for our country to do. How are we ever going to heal from this history of slavery?
Economists say any meaningful healing must include a commitment by the federal government to fix the nationwide wealth gap at an estimated cost of $14 trillion. And that's not all. In addition, they estimate the debt owed for the stolen labor through the enslavement of Black people alone is a little over $6 quadrillion. Jade Hindman, KPBS News.
And this feature is part of a midday edition special. To hear the podcast or find out what the Reparations Task Force is doing next, you can go to kpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, testimony from Trump aides sheds new light on the former president's false claims about voter fraud. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The cost of your favorite lunch items is going up as some food and drink companies are shrinking the sizes of their products. Jen Sullivan takes a closer look at the so-called lunchflation and shrinkflation phenomenons.
The return to office life is growing more expensive by the day. But let's focus on the rising cost of food, from your morning coffee to that lunchtime salad.
I can tell from having the same budget that I had before all of this, I would get less. It seemed like the bags would get smaller and smaller.
The index for food away from home has increased 7.4% over the last year. That's according to a Labor Department report. Prices for food purchased to eat at home rose 11.9%. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's the biggest 12-month jump since 1979.
It is kind of like a scary feeling because just thinking about what I used to be able to get before all of this compared to what I can get now.
Meanwhile, Starbucks raised prices in the U.S. earlier this year and said costs could continue to rise. And since the start of last year, salad chain Sweetgreen raised its menu prices by 10%. That's according to its recent earnings report. The budget pinch comes as the Fed is expected to announce another interest rate hike this Wednesday to help tame inflation. And as the White House works to bring down those soaring costs...
Make no mistake about it. I understand inflation is a real challenge to American families.
Then there's also shrinkflation. The AP reports companies are shrinking packages to deal with rising costs for raw materials, labor, and transportation. For example, Chobani Flips yogurts have shrunk from 5.3 ounces to 4.5 ounces. Bags of Frito Scoops marked party size used to be 18 ounces and are now 15.5 ounces at most retailers. And PepsiCo is downsizing Gatorade bottles from 32 to 28-ounce bottles. For today's Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
A growing body of research shows that eating more, like our ancestors did, could reduce common diseases that afflict Americans. KPBS Science and Technology reporter Thomas Fudge has this story about intermittent fasting.
The way Americans eat has led to a common condition called metabolic syndrome, in which blood sugars are high, as are the risks of heart disease and type 2 diabetes. Research shows that one answer to this is fasting.
This is an exciting area.
Mark Mattson is a neuroscientist at Johns Hopkins University.
And now there's at least 150 clinical trials of intermittent fasting in humans with various disorders. Cancers, diabetes, certain neurological disorders, etc.
Matson is involved with one of those trials. They're testing 2 groups of adults over 55 who have obesity and insulin resistance who are at risk for Alzheimer's disease. The test group is fasting 2 days a week when they consume only 500 calories.
Based on animal studies, we think that it's possible the intermittent fasting eating pattern could shift those brain biomarkers of Alzheimer's disease in a favorable direction.
Emily Manoogian is a staff scientist at San Diego's Salk Institute who studies what she calls time-restricted eating. The principle is to limit your eating to, for instance, a 10-hour window of time, say between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. This is based on circadian rhythms, the body's internal clock, which expects eating and activity to occur when it's light out.
Your body functions differently at different times of day. And so the way you process food during the middle of your day when you're active and you're going to be using that energy to function throughout the day is very different than how your body processes food at night when your body expects you to be sleeping.
And she says the fast that occurs between dinner and breakfast is crucial for the body to process the sugar and fat they've stored away.
Your body has to be able to be in at least a mildly fasted state. And I'm not saying fasting for days, mainly while you're sleeping is when you're fasting, to be able to break down energy stores that you have. And so if you're constantly eating late into the night, you're never able to really kind of break down your own energy stores because you need to be fasting for at least 12 hours before you're kind of really tapping into breaking down fat that you have and turning it back into energy for your body.
Mark Matson says the shift in the body's use of food stores from glucose to fat is a metabolic shift that comes with fasting and is very important to the body's health. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.